Hey.
Welcome, and thank you so much. I think, where I grew up is like the furthest in terms of geography from where the film was shot, and I could relate to it so much. And these are people I've never met, and it just felt like I've known them all my life, and that is like really the making of a great documentary. So thank you so much for, gifting us this film on Sunday morning, and it's your world premiere. Congratulations.
Thank you.
If you could start me off with what is your relationship with this community and the music? Yeah.
Sure. My ancestors are Irish and come from County Kerry, and I think that's a strong thread throughout my family, despite not being fully Irish by any means. And I've always loved music and felt connection in a very similar way to what I experienced when I went there and saw in these musicians and finding community through that. And so the first time I stepped into a session like this, was in a pub in Ireland, and there was just this feeling that overwhelmed me that I couldn't explain, and I keep trying, and this is my best attempt. So, yeah.
And how did you collaborate on making this film?
In so many ways. Anika and I have made a lot of art together, and hopefully we'll continue to. But I she helped me edit it. She helped me write it. She shot it. Thank goodness. The cinematography is all her, and we produced together with our partner Fungi, who is not able to make it. Sadly, she's at home in China. But I don't know.
Yeah, and Lila told me about it, 6 months before we went and shot, and she was like, "Do you want to come shoot a film in Ireland?" And I was like, "Yes, sign me up." And I'd never been to Ireland, and I don't have any real personal connection there, but like the people were so welcoming to both of us, and I think that's what you were saying earlier about how it feels like you know them because they just like welcomed us in with so much love while we were there, and I think that shows through in the footage.
Yeah, but you're the cinematographer. I wouldn't have guessed that this is the first time you're there because and when I watched this film, of course, on a smaller screen, I was taken in by, the shots of the land. And, now that you say, I thought you'd have to be a local to film that way. You've done a fantastic job. Thank you. And this is, I did not plan to ask this question, but could you just talk us through that process of acquainting yourself with the land, the geography, and then, filming it so beautifully?
Yeah, thank you. I like to think that sort of as we met each of the subjects that informed how we ended up shooting it, because like Luca Bloom, for example, was like, "You have to come with me to the Burren," and so he brought us with him to this beautiful landscape like outside of Doolin, and a lot of the musicians would tell us of their favorite spots in the area, and then we would go with them there, or at their recommendation. And I also think like we shot it kind of with like the slowness in mind that Luca talks about in the film. I think like we were there for 4 weeks, and we for the first 2 weeks didn't have a car, so we would just go on these long walks around Doolin with our cameras, and we wouldn't get very far because we would stop and film at like every single corner. But I think like we would just like stop and film like snails or slugs crossing the path for like half an hour. Like we really took our time with it, and I think that's something that Luca talked about a lot in the film and that really inspired us when we were there, that like we were in this beautiful place and we just like really took our time exploring it.
And it all looks like that. I mean, we shot from outside the B&B. We were staying all the time, and so it's just everywhere.
And when were you filming this? Was this during the pandemic?
Before.
After?
We luckily we shot in 2018 in August.
So one thing I was wondering about is, this is such a community-driven space with, the musicians constantly collaborating with one another. They know one another. They know one another's families, and the music is essentially a product of that coming together. So would you know how they dealt with the pandemic, or how if they were able to commune as much?
Not as much. I mean, it was hard. It was definitely challenging, and they did a lot of live streams, and the fiddle case still got together and we watched their live streams from home. And but Katie was sitting at home playing by herself, and with her daughter, who's now picking up the piano, I believe. And yeah, but they are back in the pubs, I believe, at this point. But it was a long run of.
Great, thank you. I'll go to the audience for questions. Yes. I'll repeat that on the mic for everyone. If there was a specific moment in your interaction with the community which made you decide to want to tell this story.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was stepping into a pub that first time that I described, and being overcome with this feeling of what I can only say is music that has passed down through so many generations and has the ancestry and has the community in it. But I think for this community specifically, we sort of just started winding around, and people would introduce us to their friends, and it was very natural the way that we met everyone, which I think really lends itself to the feeling of what was going on, because they said, oh, you have to go to this Monday night pub session, and we said, okay, and that's sort of where it all came from.
And I think the moment that sold me on the film when Lila described it to me was she showed me a video of Ted McCormack, one of the older men in the film, and he was like from a couple years ago when you had been in Doolin, right? And he's like so charismatic and just like instant. I saw the video and I was like, oh my gosh, he seems amazing. We should go meet him. And he was one of the first people we met there,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
And they were open to being the documentary project. They were open to the documentary project and being a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it took time to gain trust, and we sort of just showed up in the pubs, and it sort of took a lot of getting familiar with everyone so that they were comfortable with us being there and not being intrusive. But yeah, I mean, all in all, I think.
Yeah, and once we did one or two interviews with a few people, and they had a wonderful, like I think most of them after the interviews were like, oh, that was really meaningful. I didn't realize how philosophical we were gonna get. And I think like as we started to gain one person's trust, then they would be like, oh, you have to go interview Christy Berry, or you have to go interview Katie Thiesby, and so they led us to other musicians, and then we had the sort of like the recommendation of the first musician as they passed us on to the next.
Yeah.
More questions? Yes, ma'am.
Unfortunately not. We're headed to Ireland soon, I hope. I don't have a date yet, but we're going to go and screen it probably in that big room you saw Luca Bloom playing a concert in. That's the goal. When we were there, they were like, you're going to have to come back and show it here. So that's in the books, I hope. Yeah.
Yes, last row there.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so happy you made it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was part of what we talked about. The whole, our interviews were more of just chats with tea, and yeah, that sort of started the whole thing. And I wouldn't say I talked to everybody about it, but most people, and yeah, it was.
And I think didn't Luca Bloom sing "City of Chicago" because?
Oh yeah, because of Grandma. Yeah, so he was like, "You're gonna have to learn this and go sing it to her." Yeah.
That's so amazing. And I know we are at time, so I'll ask the last question. And I see mostly, and from what you've seen and while filming, I've seen mostly older people practicing this kind of music and coming together. So from what you saw, are there younger generations taking up to the practice of music?
There definitely are, and I think, the members of the fiddle case are pretty young comparatively, and then there are some folks in there, Anya and Adrian and Anya, who are younger, but I think, I don't even know how to say it. Yes, there are, and there are schools and there are competitions around the country that people get very into, and I think sometimes that does the thing where you get worn out and don't and take a break from the music. But even with Kieran O'Connell, he went and played, and he would play when he was younger because his brother did, and he really wanted to learn because of that. And then he left it for a while because I think it is sort of this feeling of like going and hanging out with the older folks, which people like Owen O'Neill have been in the pub since he was 15 and literally never left, and he used to play with Maiko. And so they are younger, but this crowd is, you're right to say that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why we really wanted to include the scene of Christy teaching his niece, or playing with his niece.
Such
because
a beautiful scene.
Yeah, a big thread of it is how people are passing it on and continue to pass on tradition. So
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming out today. Did you
Also,
want to add
we're
something?
going to the Four-Faced Liar pub 2 minutes that way, and I believe we have some musicians in the crowd who are going to come play, and join us if you like.
That sounds like fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.